Coming up.
It's all about what you want. Like your chart isn't going to, and you shouldn't have a chart tell you what to do. You know, you decide what you want and you look at a chart and see how can I get there from that.
Going deeper. Discovering more. Nature, science, consciousness. Beyond the rabbit hole.
Joining me on today's podcast is the very lovely Aug Stone, who practices the Chinese form of astrology known as BaZi. Please join us as we explore this rabbit hole. So, Aug, thank you for joining me on our second ever Beyond the Rabbit Hole podcast. Great that you could do
second
that.
Ever.
I know, second one ever.
I feel honored.
No, I'm honored. I'm so excited about what we're going to be talking about, which is BaZi. Am I saying that right? I think I've heard it as BaZi or
BaZi is
BaZi.
some people say BaZi, but the Chinese masters I've heard say BaZi.
Excellent. So I'm just going to open the floor to you on this, because I've had a little look, but I think it's probably better coming from somebody who does it to explain what is this thing, BaZi.
Okay. BaZi literally translates as 8 images. Most people know you were born in a certain year of a certain animal. How I was introduced to this was placemats at Chinese restaurants. You know, you're the dragon, you're the snake, you're the horse, and all that. Given a little description. There are 12 different animals. And there's an element that corresponds with each animal. Now, there are 5 elements in Eastern thought. You know, there's 4 in Western, earth, water, air, and fire. But the Chinese is fire, earth, metal, water, and wood. So it's a little different. And that's actually the cycle of production. You say that wood burns and becomes fire. Fire burns out and becomes ash, which is earth. From the earth, we mine metal. And then you can melt metal to become liquid like water. And then water sort of feeds wood, to grow.
Cool.
And
sounds a bit like paper, scissors, stone. I mean,
that would be interesting to do it that way. Metal kind of corresponds to air in Western thought. But I'm a double dragon in BaZi, and dragons are sort of, all over the place, just following trains of thought. So I'll try and keep it as much on top if I can. Stop me if I get a bit too off and I'm not clarifying anything. But so you have those 5 elements, and then you have the 12 animals. So there's a total of 60 different animals you can have, because each animal has an element attached to it. Now you can say that all dragons will have similar qualities, right? Everyone born in the same year will have very similar dragon-esque qualities. But everyone born in, say, a fire dragon year will be even more similar, because you're adding that extra layer. And that will happen every 60 years.
Sure.
1960, 1976. It's a cycle of 60 that just keeps repeating over and over again. And from the year, most people know you have this as your year. But you also have an animal for your month, your day, and your hour. If you were sort of to map, the Chinese New Year starts February 4th, which is the month of the tiger.
Right.
And on the clock, if you sort of map the clock onto the year or vice versa, the hour of the tiger, Chinese have double hours, is between 3 and 5 a.m., which is sort of when you would first see dawn, when you first see the light. So that's the beginning of the year. The tiger hour is the beginning of the day, sort of, and the tiger month is the beginning of the year in February. And then it's just that cycle of 12 through the year for each month. February is the tiger, March. Chinese months are a little skewed, like they usually start between the 4th and the 9th, mostly around the 7th of the month. So it's always good to look at a calendar, to get exactly what you are. And you need a calendar sort of to know what day it was. That would be just too much to keep track of, because it's a cycle of 60 repeating in that. The hours are a bit easier, always the same. The darkest point of the year is around the winter solstice, December 21st, which December is the month of the rat, and the hour of the rat is between 11 and 1 p.m. and 1 a.m. So it spans midnight, sort of as the month spans the winter solstice. Right. And then the hour of the horse is between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. So it spans noon, the high point of summer, because June is the month of the horse, as the high point of the day, where the sun is at its highest.
Oh, okay. So it sounds like there's a lot of correlations between other cycles that we have, because also in the Chinese traditional Chinese medicine and the circadian cycle, you've got between 1 and 3 a.m. corresponds to a certain part of the body. So and I haven't yet kind of really got into sort of all the I Ching and it's weird and wonderful stuff, but there's clearly a level of correlation between this BaZi, Chinese traditional medicine, feng shui, etc., because all these kind of cycles repeat. And the way I understand it is that these animals and these elements, they really represent other things. It's really everyday life stuff, so it's not quite as mystical as it's all made out to kind of in the language that it comes across. It's all like, oh, you're a tiger in some metal, and it's like actually it means something a little bit more straightforward. So
yes, definitely.
What I wanted to really ask you, I think what might be quite useful is to kind of dig into a little bit more about each sort of each animal and maybe what characteristics are perhaps, but what I really want to know is what's it all about? Like, what is it? Why?
Okay. Oh, I think I skipped when I started off the 8 images. So you have an element and an animal for your year, and your month, your day, and your hours. So total, 4 elements, 4 animals, 8 images, BaZi. And this is sort of the energy blueprint when you were born, just like, Western astrology. It gives you, it's a sort of a map of the possibilities of yourself, because it's not this is what's going to happen to you, because we have free will, and this is sort of the energy present for you to make the choice of what to do with that energy. That makes sense?
Yes, yeah. Similar to, my last podcast I was talking to numerologists, and it was the same sort of thing. It's like you come with a set of numbers which for the most part are not changeable, and that kind of gives certain characteristics or certain pointers, things that can help you, but ultimately there is free will. So it's quite similar to that. And I understand that in Western astrology, there's also that it just because that's there, that's not to say that you're kind of you're stuck, the put in a box kind of thing. So yeah, that kind of does make sense.
For me, it allowed me to see much more about myself that I think I otherwise would have missed, or at least at the time. It can be incredibly healing, I've found, at least. You can use it for anything. Lots of people use it for business, health, relationships. It can sort of pinpoint points in your life where you might have made a sort of choice about things that you can then go back and look at in a certain light, and change that if you so choose.
Sure. So do you mean like that you would take that date and time where you made a decision, and then like look at all the elements or look at all the pictures and then go, oh, that wasn't what I was supposed to do? How do you mean? Just elaborate a bit for me.
Well, you can reframe your thinking on it if it's not beneficial to you. If something's causing you pain or heartache, and you don't want that anymore, you can look at it in a different
In a
light.
different way, yeah, of course. I mean, which is, you know, sort of the quantum healing techniques go through that sort of similar idea, whereby it's like, well, look, the thing that's happened to you doesn't have to have negativity. You know, it's set you on a path, and maybe that path was purpose, and actually you need to look at all the variables to be able to understand what the benefit of that was, in order to kind of lend it some gratitude, perhaps, rather than remain kind of upset or living perhaps in the past, as some people say, whereby you can't kind of get past a decision that you've made. Do you think that sort of aligns?
Oh yeah, definitely. I remember my first consultation with my teacher, Richard Ashworth, who's, you know, great teacher. He emphasizes the healing a lot, I've found. And I remember our first consult, which was only an hour long, I wept, I think, like 6 times, just like from what he was telling me. He met me once briefly at one of my gigs, and then he read my chart, and then, you know, he really knew nothing about me, but the things he was saying just really, really hit home in a way that I hadn't really thought of before.
So what got you into the BaZi?
A series of coincidences. I've always had like a slight interest in feng shui and stuff, in Eastern thought and things like that. And then one day, I guess it must have been 2014, I think, I was visiting England. I was in Brighton in one of my favorite shops in the lanes, Wax Factor, which is half record shop, half bookshop. And I was just looking through the bookshelves, and I was going to Cardiff the next day. And I saw this book by Richard, my teacher, and it just said The Feng Shui Diaries, and took it off the shelf, and I flipped it open. I think I was going to be stopping in Bristol, because Bristol was the first word I saw, and I was like, oh, well, that's kind of odd. And then I kept flipping through the pages, and like everything was sort of like, you know, a coincidence, just things that have been happening lately. So I was like, I'll pay £3 for this to read it on the train. And then I read it, and it was fascinating. That's where I learned that you have, you know, more than just the one animal. And Richard said, you know, email him for your day because you need the calendar. So I emailed him, and he wrote me back that I was born on the day of the fire horse, which is a performer. And this is what really got me interested, because the fire horse is yang fire. It's the most yang you could be. It's the most extroverted of all the animals. Very, very out there, you know, visibly. But the year I was born is the year of the fire dragon, which fire can also represent being in your own head, thinking too much. It is one of maybe the most introverted animal. And I've always considered myself to be, you know, very shy and, you know, need a lot of alone time by myself. But also, like, when I get on stage performing, I'm a completely different person. So there's this pull between that introversion and extroversion that really makes me, that it explained it very clearly to me. And I'm a writer as well. And someone said to me, well, is that why you write? Because writing is, you know, putting stuff out there, but at a distance where you can control it. And that all really started to hit home. And the further I explored with this, the much more I got into. I took Richard's courses to learn BaZi and Feng Shui. And then this year I've been taking a bunch of different courses. I'm still studying with Richard. Joey Yap is probably the most well-known Chinese metaphysics practitioner. When this all hit, when lockdown hit, I really started thinking, you know, what could I do to help people? Because I'd read people's charts before, but never, you know, here and there. But I was like, everyone's stuck at home. You know, what can I do? Still being in touch with people. And I realized that I had the time to learn more about this, and I could talk to people more. And I've read a bunch so far this year. I've taken a bunch of courses, read a bunch, and they seem to be helpful. I'm really pleased about that.
That's good. Great.
Yeah, another thing I noticed that's important to me is in my chart, I have no metal, which I said before, metal is air. Also represents a bunch. It's timing. It represents your lungs. So I've always breathed. My breathing has always been very, very shallow. And this is one of the things Richard pointed out to me in our first meeting. And ever since then, I've been aware of this, that, you know, that isn't present in my chart at all. So it's something I really have to pay attention to. So I've really past 5 years really focused on, learning to breathe.
So
better.
is that the sort of thing, that because that's quite interesting actually. So if something's not in your chart, I'm crossing modalities because I'm kind of coming from where I'm understanding, sort of more metaphysical kind of constructs. But the way I understand it is nothing's actually missing. It just sometimes takes other forms. So because the sense of missing kind of evokes some kind of sense of lack, which is not necessarily the frequency we want to be dealing with. We want to be dealing with coherence and love and appreciation and all of these kind of more coherent feelings, if that's the right word, that make us feel that actually interact better with our physiology as well. So in a health sense, that make us healthier, more vital people. So that's it. It's quite interesting to me that you say there's something that's not in your chart, and therefore that you have to work on it. How does that come up in sort of a reading kind of sense, and what do you take from it?
Well, I mean, you're right. Nothing's missing. These are all metaphors. That's important to keep in mind. But it's if something's not in the chart, it sort of means you don't really have an affinity with it, and it doesn't really bother you because you don't know what you don't have, right? But at the same time, you can, for things you want to do, like the chart, you sort of use it to propel you somewhere, to get you somewhere. So for me, as a musician and now a comedian, metal represents timing, and that is always something I've had to work on. And so I know, it was kind of pointed out to me that would be beneficial, like kind of before I would have realized it.
Okay, so in that sense, this information was helpful to you, and therefore perhaps synchronistically you arrived at that information just before you needed it in that sort of sense.
Yeah. And also, I mean, this isn't a static thing. Like, you're always interacting with the energies of the years, and you also have something called a luck pillar. Yes. There's a calculation you do that sort of tells you when you sort of made a first important decision about your life. And then like every 10 years from that is sort of ruled over by a different animal. So just because I don't have any metal in my natal chart doesn't mean metal doesn't come in the luck pillars. And also, this year is the year of the metal rat. So metal is there in that. So
then it's present, but perhaps this is the year that you are guided to pay more attention to it because it's also there. Would that be
it's there for you to use more. Also for me, I have a lot of wood in my chart, as do you. I think I didn't do your whole chart, but I wrote out your animals just to get a quick look if you wanted to talk about them.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. But metal, there's a cycle of production I was talking about before. Wood produces fire, produces earth. There's also the cycle of control, which fire controls metal because it melts it and makes it useful. And I am a fire person, as I said before. So I don't really have that stuff to control. There's a lot of implications there, but metal chops wood, and you make wood useful by chopping it and building out of it. So I have a lot of wood. So I have a lot of, which is my resource element. And it's also, I think wood has to do with writing. A big thing for me is being disciplined in my writing. I know I'm at my best writing when I can get up at 5 a.m. and write till noon and do that every day. But because I have no metal, discipline is an issue with me. I really have to, pay attention. It's not naturally there. So I have to really pay attention to make it happen.
Yeah. This stuff, I mean, this has, because use your words, Hannah. Because this is not a well-known practice, certainly over in the West. I'd never heard of it, but I have heard of astrology, and I always thought astrology was complete nonsense, because I was like, how can there only be 12 types of people in the world? and how does, you know, saying something like today you will be lucky, like how's that helpful? Which is basically all I saw of astrology, which is obviously, now I know that's not what it is. But this is kind of fascinating to me because the terminology used in the Chinese form of, basically this is astrology Chinese style, isn't it? I mean, that's essentially what it is. But we're not really talking about the sun and the stars, and you know, so it's a little bit you know, I think someone coming straight in and going, oh, what's this? And we're talking, you wouldn't really know it was an astrological kind of chart, because, you know, we're just talking about monkeys and wood. So
yeah. And seasonal. It's very seasonal.
Yeah.
You know, summer is the season of fire, autumn the season of metal, winter is the season of water, and spring is the season of wood. I like it because it's easier for me to picture that way. I mean, I know a bit about Western astrology, but like you said, like saying someone's, you know, a Leo or whatever isn't an accurate description at all of the person. I mean, it's a very little bit, but you need to know a person's entire chart if you're going to do anything, say anything useful about them. And that takes a lot of time. And it takes me between 3 and 4 hours to cast a chart. But with Chinese, it's very seasonal, like I was saying, and these do, you know, correspond to positions of the stars and the sun and everything. It's just that it's easier for me to think in terms of, you know, spring and summer, you know, wood and fire, as opposed to, you know, the exact degree of, you know, Mercury and Libra or whatever you were talking about.
Do you think there's a little bit of a sense of the fact that we've almost lost our connection to the sky? Because we don't, I mean, recently we've been able to see it again, but, you know, certainly, you know, in built up areas, we can barely see our stars anymore. And I think that, you know, probably before the advent of electricity and, you know, lit up areas, everybody was a lot more in touch with what was above them. So, you know, maybe that visualization of things which we can totally relate to, like, you know, the earth elements and earth animals, is perhaps a little bit easier to get your head around.
Oh yeah, totally. And I think on that same trip, when I was heading to Cardiff, I wasn't just going to Cardiff. I think I was going to the Eisteddfod that year. And it was, you know, I was in rural Wales, and it was, you could see the sky being out of the city. And, you know, it's awesome to be able to see so many stars. It really gives you a completely different sense of things. I think something much more in tune with who we are as humans that we've sort of lost touch with.
Absolutely.
100 years.
I always found, and I mean, I was, I make no secret of it, I was completely anti woo woo. You know, I was just like, I was, you know, just the antithesis of anything that was out of the ordinary. I was just like, nope, not having it. And yet, when you're, I mean, for me, under kind of a Cornish sky down in the West Country, where you can see the Milky Way a little bit, you know, and it's just like, there's something else, you know, that it just, there's always a bit of a sense. And I think probably now I can verbalize that feeling a little bit more, because I'm much more in tune with my own subtle energies and things. But, you know, there's just a feeling that comes over you that something's bigger than you. And, you know, instead of walking around with this kind of separatist view and, you know, the I suppose the Darwinian kind of evolution, you know, theory, which is, you know, banged into you, but, you know, to suddenly go, there's something, you know, there has to be, because it's just beautiful, and it's so much bigger than you are. Just to be able to comprehend how much space is in space, it's just like, oh wow. And I do think we lose that a little bit. Anyway, we're tangenting a little bit away from you know, it is a fascinating conversation, I think, but I
was going to say, we don't have to talk too much, but at the same time, we've sort of lost touch with the earth itself. Like, and this is relevant, stay with me. I studied bioenergetic therapy.
Right.
I was doing that, and I found that wonderfully helpful. A lot of that is just exercises, grounding exercises, they call them, to get you in touch with, like, you know, the lower half of your body, which often we're so much in our head that we're unaware, you know, of stuff down there unless we're using it, but like just standing and feeling into your feet. And to me, there's like the feeling of being barefoot, and this sounds really hippie-ish, and I was like you, very anti-woo-woo for a while, but just standing barefoot on like, in a field is this amazing feeling connection to the earth.
Oh,
And,
absolutely. And I mean, physiologically, it has a lot of importance as well, which we have lost. I've actually been writing a blog today about infrared therapy, and just talking about how, and this is super geeky, but the photons interact at the mitochondrial level, and basically helps all kinds of things, metabolism. I'm not going to go into it, but the fact that we've lost our connection with natural light, because all of those frequencies are present in natural light at certain times of day. So first thing in the morning, you get infrared without UV, and that's healing, and that gives us a lot of physiological benefits. But what do we do, especially in winter, especially in the UK? We're kind of in our houses, completely separated with double glazing, putting our artificial light on. We didn't used to do that, and so there's benefits to being back at outside, connected to the earth, which provides us with electrons. Our body runs on electrons. We are electric. So yeah, it's going to feel good, because there's also the element that the frequency of the Schumann resonance of the earth is in the same window of wavelength as our brainwave state when we're in alpha brainwave, which means that we're in a state of calm, basically. So I'm not that I'm into the science or anything, but but I guess I kind of wanted to know why, because we can feel it. And I think when you get in touch with yourself a little bit, and you start to really listen, then and your heart a little bit kind of tells you. But actually, if you can kind of get heart and brain to correspond and go, well, that's because that. I mean, for me, certainly, that was my kind of guiding route into the down the rabbit hole, where it was like, okay, but I can see scientific stuff that says actually that's not quite as woo-woo as we think it is. So
oh yeah, totally. I think just because something isn't explained yet doesn't mean it can't be explained eventually.
No.
If it's it's there. But what I was going to say, to tie it all back into the chart before I forget, the elements are what are known as the heavenly stems. They appear on top of the chart, and then your animals are on the it's a pillar. So you have the stem on the top, the branch, it's called, on the bottom. These are called the earthly branches, which are the animals. So you have earth luck, and then you have heaven luck, and then we have the final third of that is human luck, which is our sort of free will, how they all come together in the chart.
Okay,
So
cool. And that's
looking...
yeah. Sorry, I don't want to cut you off. That's I've seen that in feng shui as well. So that's kind of the Chinese elements being, so you've got the divine, the subtle, the stuff that you can't see, and you've got your the stuff that you can be involved with, but there's also the stuff that's here, but we can see, but we're not necessarily subjectively involved in.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm glad I understand that. Excellent. Okay, so why don't we have a little look? I'm interested in stuff that you have that you've put together for me, but I think what would also be useful is perhaps if we kind of go through a little bit of just really nutshell kind of stuff. What an animal is, like what that might mean, just sentence on each kind of one. So you kind of did the dragon, and then maybe what's a monkey, what's the
okay, well, let's do them in order then, because it starts with the rat.
Okay.
And rats are very charming, can also be cunning, like to talk. In your monkey,
Yes.
The dragon, the rat, and the monkey all make up the triangle of water. There's 12 animals, 4 different triangles representing each of the elements. So they're kind of they tend to get along well, especially if they're working on a project together. Next up is the ox, which is part of the triangle of metal. Well, actually, I don't want to confuse things too much, but there are 4 animals that are earth animals: the ox, the dragon, the sheep, and the dog. And these are kind of stubborn, as you would imagine earth to be. Ox are the most spiritual of all the animals, I think. They're definitely the most sensitive in every sense of that word. Very persistent, but sometimes they tend to stick with things too long, past their sell-by date. Tiger is one of the wood creatures, part of the triangle of fire. Tigers, I mean, king of the jungle, they're all about space. They can be very patient, need their own space, but very, very noble in that sort of way. Yang wood, can be aggressive as well. Rabbits up next is yin wood. That correlates to around March. Very romantic, most rabbits. Home loving. If you see a lot of rabbits in a chart, usually represent the mother. There's stuff with the mother going on. Dragons, like I said, dragons are magical, which is something I really like, being a double dragon. But also, very much, head in the clouds, not often don't deal with the real world too much. But they can be very magical. The Chinese character for a dragon is a dragon underneath thunderclouds. So it's all about sudden change. Like with the dragon, very much they can get stuck because they're one of the earth animals, but they can just decide to change their minds, and like a rainstorm will clear the atmosphere completely. Up next is the snake. Relates to roughly May, and also the first of the summer months. The snake is yin fire. The snake and dragon together make up what is known as the House of Magic and Mystery, which is really cool. The snake is kind of like the sorcerer's apprentice. Snakes are all about truth, as you might be able to guess. Can be very deceptive, but a well-balanced snake is an upholder of the truth. So it's tough to find those in politics, where you often do. The horse is interesting because horse is very much about ego, but it's also about fellowship. Can be hasty, kind of. They like to run, but at the same time they get on well with them. They're very extroverted performers. The sheep is kind of like up next is kind of like the sidekick to the horse as well. They're a team. Sheep on the opposite, because the sheep are roughly July and the ox is roughly January, they clash. Each animal has a clash that is directly across from them on the calendar. So while the ox is more spiritual, the sheep is probably more religious. I mean, that sort of element to it, but that sort of difference between the two. Sheep like to belong to things, groups of friends, clubs, that sort of thing. Up next is the monkey, which is, that's you. Here we go. The first month of autumn. The monkey is yang metal. So the monkey is very funny, very technically minded. Those two together kind of make them mischievous.
Okay, I can get that. I think I can get that. Mm-hmm.
And
I don't know about funny. I mean, maybe by mistake.
Your chart implies you're funny.
Oh, good.
So if a joke fails, you just tell them that it's supposed to be funny.
Yeah, it's about you. It's not about me.
Up next is the rooster, which is yin metal. Roosters are all about sex and beauty. Monkey and rooster together, again, House of Commerce, I think it's called, because it's metal is money, as you'd imagine, coins and whatnot. The last month of autumn is the dog, which is at the opposite opposes the dragon. Again, they're both yang earth, so they're very powerful but very stubborn. Dogs can be very stubborn, especially if you have more than one dog in a chart. But I mean, the opposite side of that is dogs are very loyal, you know. Then last but not least of the year, we round out with the pig. Whereas if the dog is the guardian of the home, the pig is happy within the home. I think that's the Chinese character. It's a pig underneath a rooftop. One pig, because a couple of the animals, and I have these in my chart, tend to self-clash. Like if multiples appear, they tend not to really, it's usually an ego thing, and most things are. But pigs can kind of feel overcrowded if other pigs are around. But pigs are cool. They're can be multi-talented, you know. Thing about the pig is they don't often ask for help when they need it. And that's your 12 animals.
Very cool. So the yin and the yang. I mean, I had a quick listen to your mentor, Richard, and he was talking about it being basically kind of a yes and a no kind of thing. I mean, my understanding of yin and yang is more how can I put this? I mean, for me, in my language, sympathetic and parasympathetic, you know, because I'm a nervous system person, but it's that kind of, that balance of, you know, work hard, play hard, you know, fight or flight, rest and digest. But it's that series of opposites where you've got your fiery and then your calm kind of thing. That's how I've always really understood yin and yang. So it was very interesting to just have it as a yes or a no, which is obviously an opposite, so it makes sense. But how do you make sense of that in this?
I tend to see yin and yang as active and receptive principles. And it's weird because, I mean, very rarely do you see a chart that's all yin or all yang. I mean, everything happens because stuff comes together. Because, like, yeah, I mean, fire is yang, summer, the horse, and water is yin, winter, the rat. But the rat is a yang animal. It's one of, like, every other one. The rat is yang, the ox is yin, tiger yang, rabbit yin. So it's all sort of mixed together.
So in everything there's balance, ultimately. There's...
Yeah, or an attempt to balance.
An attempt to balance, yeah. And perhaps you find where you need to balance, and that's the point.
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways of looking at charts. Like the old way to do it is just kind of see what needs balancing, what's too strong in a chart, what's too weak. But the new way, Joey Yap really emphasizes this. I've been taking a lot of his classes lately, so this is on my mind. It's all about what you want. Like, your chart isn't going to, and you shouldn't have a chart tell you what to do. You know, you decide what you want, and you look at a chart and see, how can I get there from that? So, like, you what you want to do isn't really in your chart. You're going to have to work a lot harder to make that happen. It's going to be more of a struggle. But let's say you're overly fire, but what you want has to do with fire, then you emphasize the fire. I mean, it's there, it's strong. You might be unbalanced, but I mean, that's what you're after. You know?
Okay, so you can use this information then to focus on your strengths, and then you go, okay, well, this is what I want, but this is the best way for me to get into it, you know, because if I suddenly decide I want to be a painter, but actually I can't paint, that's going to be quite a struggle. Whereas I might decide that actually I'm much better placed to, if I want to enter the art world, there are other ways that I can do it, and I can look at the way. That's a terrible analogy, but it was the first thing that came into my head. So.
Well, it depends. Like, do you want to be a painter, or do you want to enter the art world? And if neither, then, you know, we don't need to ask the question.
No, I definitely don't. But yeah, I'm just to kind of, I'm just trying to kind of get a feel for, like, what's it useful for? Why? I mean, you obviously, you know, you've said you kind of fell into it by accident, but, you know, it's there. If it was like, right, Hannah, I really think you should have this, because, and there was kind of an elevator pitch, and I know it's more complicated than that, but what would be the point?
The point. Okay, I guess like how you look at a chart would be useful to sort of explain a bit. Each pillar sort of relates to something in your life. Your year is kind of where you come from. It's who you are it's who you are on a very general level. Relates to your parents, and you can go with your grandparents as well. It's the most external. It's not, you read a chart from right to left, it's the pillar on the right. It represents, how you view the world, and your friend group and stuff like that. Next along is your month pillar, and this represents your work. So that's a big thing for most people, looking at, this animal there. Yeah. And you look at that for sort of, job type stuff. It could also represent your siblings. They have many, many meanings. And then your day pillar, which is third in, represents who you really are on a more subtle level than your year. I mean, you'll know this more than anyone else. And then your hour pillar represents sort of your thoughts, your aspirations, your children. Of all this, what is known as the day master is the most important. It's the element of your day pillar. So, I mean, your day is a metal pig. But of that, the most important part is the metal, is who you really are. And how that relates to everything else in your chart can tell you so many things. So it's the interaction between that yin metal of who you are. And yin metal is beauty. It's related to jewelry. You probably get attention, and you probably like getting attention. That's the thing for yin metal.
Sometimes it's not wanted, but I guess I can't pretend I don't draw attention. What would draw me to this rather than any other kind of modality which is self-development based, I suppose. Obviously we've got the astrology, we've got numerology, and there are other kind of reading kind of things that people would go to.
I get what you're saying, and I don't really know what draws people in, or I certainly wouldn't try and sell this, as a you should do this. I think if you're drawn to something, then you go with it.
Yeah. So really you find it and it attracts you, and you say, I'm going to have a look at this kind of thing.
Within my chart, I mean, dragons are really open to this sort of thing. Being that sort of magic, like interest in magic, interest in, that sort of thinking, the ethereal and whatnot. So I can see in my chart why I'm drawn to it, but I'm drawn to those things anyway. I mean, I also am interested in Western astrology and, all the things you've been saying, but this kind of resonated with me in a way, not that the others didn't, but this is just kind of how it was there for me to study when I got interested in it, and I just sort of went with it and haven't really looked back.
This was the one. Cool. Well, I mean, it's great, I think, to find a path and a passion in what you're doing. The way that you can learn to express what kind of you're about. That's how, I am not an astrologer or a numerologist or a BaZi practitioner, because they didn't resonate with me at the time. And I think now that I'm interested in all kinds of things, I believe that there are lots of different ways that people can find what they're looking for, and it's the one that resonates with them that they tend to take on, which is partly the reason for exploring this stuff, because like I said, I never heard of this, and if somebody out there goes, okay, that sounds interesting, then fantastic, then we've brought it to somebody else. Should we have a look at my stuff and let's see what we can get into?
Sure. I was just going to say, you were born in the month of the water sheep.
Ooh.
Which is one of the most spiritual animals, which implies your interest in this sort of thing. But the monkey of the year of your birth, being very technically minded, would tend to be skeptical, like you said you have been.
That little right left brain kind of thing doing its, yeah. But I like that balance because it means that I don't find myself too up in the clouds. I kind of, you know, I have those periods where I'm, you know, like meditation, let's go with my intuition, but I'm also going, yeah, but I really want to get into the nuts and bolts of how this stuff works. I like getting under the hood and taking it apart.
Yes. And yeah, your chart is it speaks of wood and metal. I mean, those are the two most prominent. How would you like to go about it? Should I tell you your animals and then we'll go from there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just, yeah, let's do so wood and metal together. Is there anything that kind of brings up specifically?
Well, wood controls metal. It chops it to make it useful. One of the things, it's your wealth. Wealth to you is wood. And since you control your wealth, you tend to have a lot of it. You have what's known as indirect wealth is very high in your chart. And like I was saying, wood is the wealth element to a metal day person.
Okay, interesting, cool. Yeah. Whatever you feel, because this is not something, you know, I'm coming from a reference point of nowhere, so any information in any order that you feel is relevant or useful is good.
Okay. Let's see. So you're born in the year of the metal monkey. And your year kind of is the most dominant of the pillars from birth to age 16. And it represents your parents because they have a big influence on you during that time. Because monkey is a metal animal, and it's a metal monkey, and you are a metal person, implies you get on quite well with your parents.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Next up is the water sheep, which kind of rules from 17 to 32. Each is a 16-year pillar.
Okay.
And this represents your work, usually because that's the time people would choose, you know, what they're going to do with their life, you know, for a living between 17 and 32 when they go to school or, you know, start to study things. You're a water sheep, which, like I said, is one of the most spiritual, slightly eccentric, or at least interested in eccentric things.
I don't often get called normal, put it that way. But interesting,
Okay.
I mean, between 17 and 32, I was very, very much immersed in music because I am a professional singer, but my profession was music. And my degree is music. And I was a singing teacher and a performer. So.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. And like I said, metal represents the lungs. And you're a metal day person, so it makes sense.
I can definitely breathe. I can do that. I've got that down.
Well done. But okay, this is an added element to it. It's what's known as the sapsands, or the 10 gods. How your day master relates to every other element in the chart is ruled over by one of these gods or spirits. It's just sort of a category, I would guess, of as I explained, I think it'll be apparent. Your month has what's known as the eating god in it, which is your output, because it's water sheep. Metal produces water, so it's your, you know, what you produce. So it's very creative. It was, though the sheep is earth, which supports the metal. Yeah, all right. There's fire in the sheep, which is, it probably wasn't easy. Okay.
No. Well, you know what it's like being a musician.
Yeah.
It's not easy about that. And I mean, I really wasn't at peace with who I was, because, you know, between 17 and 32, who really is? You know, so there, being a performer, being a singer, and I think, like you, there's a lot of singers that I know, mainly because that's my profession. I know mostly singers who are, you know, would really describe themselves as introverts, who are, you know, happy to perform, because I suppose it's almost like you put your armor on and you know that you were born to perform, but there's a little bit of an inner fight, which I've then since sort of come to understand as really being the ego kind of trying to rear its head up above where the heart is, and actually that we need to balance the lower chakra in order to kind of get a little bit more of a coherent sense of self and be at peace with the fact that we are born to be performers and that's okay. So I think there's all that internal battle that goes on. There's all that kind of am I good enough, am I worthy, you know, all of these questions that come up, you know, because you're putting yourself out there so much more than other people, and there's also the fear, the lack that comes with, well, you know, basically people telling you that you should get a proper job at some point. You don't know when your next gig is, and you know, you're kind of living on a shoestring, but it was always exciting, you know, for all the challenge. I don't regret it, you know, going through that. I mean, I do, as I say, I do still sing, but it's not really my main, I mean, especially in the last few months I haven't really had the opportunity. But yeah, I mean, it is that, you know, there's definitely that sense of struggle, and then coming out of that, I mean, it'd be interesting to see what you come up with that, because obviously then there's another stage that I went through that was, you know, transitional. So
Was your dad a performer?
Dad is an organist, a church organist. I mean, he was a teacher predominantly. In fact, I think he made a choice rather than to be an organist to actually go into teaching, because it would support the family. But I think you know, really he probably would have liked to have been a performing musician, and is, you know, to a certain extent, but has taken on more of a pastoral job.
Your father box has what's known as the herding officer in it, which, like I said, the eating god is your output. Herding officer is the opposite polarity of that. Eating god is the creative, and the herding officer is the performer. So you have herding officer and Rob Wealth, which kind of represents fans, a community, in your year pillar, which is the most obvious. So it makes sense you would be out there doing stuff, or you would enjoy.
Although I never really felt I had fans. I always felt like everything was against me, but then that was probably that you know, that force. So
here we go. From in your luck pillar cycle, from 20 to 30, it's a metal snake, which, like I was saying, everything has a clash. Opposite on the calendar. You were born, okay, the pig. You're a metal pig day pillar. Who you are is a metal pig. Pig is represented by the month of November. Snake is the month of May. So they are a direct clash. So from 20 to 30, you had a direct clash with like everything that would imply.
Which is why nothing worked, right? Okay, I get that. So it wasn't my fault. Fine.
Things weren't what they seemed.
I just removed that responsibility from myself. No, I mean, I genuinely, it's interesting what you said earlier about making peace with things, you know, by understanding them. And I think I've already been through that process of kind of going, nothing's ever in the way, it's only ever on the way. So interesting that, yeah, I mean, it was a really, really difficult period. Yeah. But, you know, lots of lessons. So
yes, good to learn. For you, there would have been lessons. I haven't done the exact calculation, but around 20, you hit your first big fate change. These luck pillars around 10 years old. Something significant would have happened then. Same at around 20 and 30, and at 40 as well.
Maybe it's all going well. So if anyone doesn't know, because I turned 40 last month, so we can
say that. Okay.
I don't mind. I'm happy. I'm very comfortable with my age. It's all good. But yeah, so it's quite interesting for me, because I sort of felt that 40 is quite significant in a positive way, actually. You know, the just the idea of everything kind of, I had this theory, and it's interesting how you kind of put it in the decades, because I was like, yeah, from you know, from when you're born to when you're 20, it doesn't really count, that's training period. From 20 to 40 is when you just make all your mistakes. And then, then you can hit 40 and go, right, I know how to play this now. I know this isn't my first rodeo. And I've got a lot of things that I can fall back on and go, actually, no, I don't want to do it that way this time. I'm going to do it another way. So
a very good way to think of it.
Anyway, yes, where are we up to?
Your current fate pillar from 40 to 50 is an earth rabbit, which again has more indirect wealth. But earth rabbit is sort of the brief for that is fertile soil. So yeah, there'll be stuff for you to produce.
Excellent. Well, yeah, I mean, there's this podcast. I'm producing that.
I mean, you've only been 40 for what?
That's a good start. I know. I kicked it off. Yeah. Lots of information to try and get out, or to just gather and to put out. I had a really interesting lesson that I heard, and it was basically, in order to really kind of resonate and vibrate at a frequency that you're happy at, to use that kind of language, all you've got to do is what you really, really want to do to the best of your ability, and not worry about an outcome. And I thought that's such good advice, isn't it? Because we're always like, oh, if I do this, then what would happen? And it's like, maybe just dump that for a while and go, I want to do this because I want to do it. And it turns out it's a much happier place. So
but it's so hard to get to. Well, I think for some people, for me, definitely, my teacher told me this so many times, you can't control the outcome, but you got to do what you want to do.
Yeah. And don't worry about the outcome. That's the thing, I think the way in modern society, everything is pillared around and built around is to create a status, a job, a wealth, or something, and that the repercussions of not doing that are something bad. And then we wonder why we're a society with anxiety, because it's just like, well, we're worried about every little thing, and also what other people will think about us, because really, the way I understand it now is that's absolutely none of my business. It's what other people think about me is their business, and it's not really mine. There's subtleties within that, which are, there are things where maybe you might want to consider what people think about you, but not to the point at which it dampens your own spirit. So
exactly.
You do you is the easiest way to say that. So
So what do you want to know?
So is that, I mean, basically, that's kind of a generalized sense of who I am, where I've come from, etc., etc., and that's kind of the foundation of a chart. Would you say that's kind of where you would start?
Yeah, I would start by getting the 4 animals and then doing the luck pillars, and then you look at other things, which I haven't had a chance to do with this. But there are many more nuance. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's what there's obviously a lot of nuance, and a lot of things that can be looked at, and from a healing, from a therapeutic perspective, which is the way that you kind of described your own experience with it. What kind of things would you if I'm your client now, and I've not been here before, and I'm not really sure what to expect, how do we get into the kind of the healing element? How does that work?
There's many ways it could pop up from what I would see. And that's why, I mean, you can do this, you can get a computer generated chart. But I cast by hand, because if you're focused on something, things will come to you. You're paying attention to the process as it's happening, and then you jot those down to then talk with the person whose chart it is. And that's really beneficial. Lots of stuff will come because you're looking at it in so much detail rather than just having it right in front of you and going, oh, okay. So there's many, I mean, you'll notice stuff like clashes. There's stuff known as punishments and harms. which kind of like a harm usually indicates a betrayal. And there's certain animal combinations that, like a rooster in a rat year is probably prone to drinking more, like stuff like that. So this being a rat year, you should probably a rooster should watch that. Although it's very difficult with everything going on. But I mean, that's sort of stuff you'll notice. And we're entering a rooster month now, so sort of temptations like that up until October 7th will be sort of prominent in just the energy of the world. And like I said, yeah, you calculate the luck pillars, the fate pillars, same thing. And you can see like what year it took place in. All these sort of different animals at play will sort of indicate something. And then, it's up to them if they want to talk about it or not. But I usually point out you would have made a significant decision about your life at this age.
And I suppose that would then potentially lead to honing in on a more specific day chart if they wanted to explore it further. Would that be the sort of thing that would happen, or?
You wouldn't have to cast anything more.
Okay, so the chart's the chart, but then you can
for a full chart, I will also cast the palaces, which are sort of the energy of your. For you, it would be yin metal, how strong that energy is at different points throughout the chart, and then there are the stars, and they're.
So there are stars. We do have stars.
They call them the stars, but they're all sort of related to the animals as well. Like there's what's known as the sky horse star or the traveling star, and these are either the monkey, the snake, the tiger, or the pig. You have two of those, but those are sort of they're known as the stations. They're the fastest moving. Like the four earth animals are the slowest of all the animals. But then the four stations are the quickest. And then there's the four cardinals, which are horse, rabbit, rooster, and rat, which are sort of like sort of the most charismatic of them all. They're the height of each season. So it's kind of like there's charisma there. The presence of all four at once, which I'm not sure I've ever seen. Actually, I saw it once, and it's very strong. But also, being that powerful, it's tough to control. So
there's always that side of things, isn't there? When you've got a lot of something, that it's actually harder to balance. So on the one hand, it can look quite attractive, where you go, yeah, I've got a lot of this, and it's like, but actually that means that this is really difficult. So
yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay.
Did I answer your question?
It's difficult to question something that you don't really. This is so big, this whole thing. Because when you really look at what a chart correlates to and how you can go so huge on it, can't you? Really, it can be a long investigation where you're delving into lots and lots of little details. It
can go on forever. I had my first consultation with my teacher 2015, I think, and like every year we have a meeting to discuss the energy of the year coming up. What will be at play I should be aware of, and also throughout the year I'll often get in touch with him to talk about a specific thing going on and how that relates. It really helps to have questions. Like I can give you a sort of general feel of who you are, depending on how much I go into it. But if you have a question to address, then you can really focus and see what the chart has to tell you.
So would you say that that's what it's like when I'm looking at kind of tools, if I was looking at this as a tool for my life, something to kind of, go, right, well, this is something which will help me with, self-development or something. And, I was like, I'm struggling about making a decision, or I'm struggling with, something that has happened maybe to me, or maybe somewhere close to me, or something like that. This is the kind of thing that you would
definitely
be working with?
Yeah, you would look at what the chart implies, and
It's very interesting. It really is, because it's I suppose on it depends what your level of understanding of metaphysics is, as to how deeply you can really get your teeth into this. And I suppose, I I'm coming from a place where I've definitely, been on a journey to discover a lot about what we call, I suppose, subtle energies, the stuff that's all around us, and what perhaps this universe is made up of isn't everything that it seems to be. And yet it certainly seems that 10,000 years ago people had a pretty good idea, and
Yeah.
in their language, which obviously differs to our modern scientific language, they're basically saying a lot of the things which now modern theories of metaphysics and unified physics are putting together, which is that we interact with our environment, be that the physical environment that we can see, and also the energetic environment that we can't see. So but what about this whole time, the fact that you're born and it's already set? Like, how do you feel about that? I mean, for me, it's kind of a bit huge. Do you know what I mean? That it's like, what does that imply if there's already a blueprint and a plan?
I was just reading John Higgs's KLF book, remember? And Bill Drummond had a great quote, and I wish I can remember it exactly, but it was like, everything is predetermined and we have free will about everything. So if both are true, what does it matter? Do whatever you want. For me, I studied Kabbalah for a while, which is very interesting as well. And I think I kind of made the choice to go more towards the Chinese metaphysics because it was making more sense to me. But
so Kabbalah is the Jewish numerology, the tree of life. Am I
Jewish mysticism, the tree of life. But I heard about the idea that you choose your exact time of birth, you choose your parents, you choose everything, and that might very well not be true. But looking at it in that way, I think is the most beneficial. Like, you're like, I chose this. What can I get out of it that will benefit me to look at it this way? So you're not feeling sorry for yourself that what look like limitations.
Do you know that concept? Because obviously that's on my radar too. Why wouldn't it be? But that whole idea that that we are in spirit form and that we choose our physical body. It's like a bodysuit. We choose who our parents are. We choose who we're going to manifest ourselves into in physical form. But then we forget. Like,
oh yeah,
what's that? Is that just a hilarious game? Are we literally are we Sims? And we're just putting a hilarious game together, whereby wouldn't it be really funny if I decided that these are the challenges I want to face in this life, but I'm not going to tell myself, and I've got to figure it out.
That
what
seems
kind
so
of
much what that life is like.
But a hilarious game are we actually playing here?
That seems it exactly.
It is funny, isn't it? And yet, I mean, there's obviously a process by which I kind of have some weird energy around the words waking up, because I think people are using them in a strange way. But that kind of through a series of synchronicities, you get to a point where you're led down a path which kind of makes you remember who you are, as certainly to a extent. And I feel like that's a bit of a process that I've been going down maybe in the last 3 or 4 years. Whereas, I mean, even even probably a year ago, if somebody had told me that I'm that I would just be speaking about, that I was a spirit form, and I'd be kind of like, yeah, really. And I'm kind of, with the whole kind of angels and spirit guides thing. Now, I'm not like I am open to everything, and actually what I really want to, bit of a goal of mine is to go and spend a bit of time with a shaman perhaps, and really kind of get into the nuts and bolts of that kind of thing. But for me, with my science brain on, I'm like, are we, is it really angels and guides? Is it really higher beings, or is it just forms of energy and thought form, and ways that we're interpreting consciousness in a way that we can understand a little bit through what's in our history books, a little bit through kind of what we feel and find to be comfortable. Now, I am quite dissonant about that, which probably means there's going to be a point at which I get to a better answer. And I'm always very open about that fact when I don't really get something, because I think it's important, rather than just being like, I'm going to join the woo-woo brigade, which means I totally understand all of that stuff. But at the same time, I do appreciate that everything has an energy, because everything is frequency. So, we don't know. There's universe upon universe upon multiverse sitting there, and there's versions of me in each of them. How do I know that I'm not just seeing an imprint of me in another dimension and thinking it's some kind of angelic form? I mean, I don't know.
True. No, I mean, I tend to think that it is all energy, and there's no reason you shouldn't call, a higher form of energy an angel, if that suits your way of thinking. Are you familiar with Robert Anton Wilson?
No, I don't think so.
He wrote the Illuminatus trilogy with Robert Shea, and this, I mean, very few things I've said changed my life, but reading this book definitely did, because I think I was always sort of like scared of this stuff when I was younger, like this sort of openness to other worlds that could potentially harm you. And I was writing a book, a sort of a I won't go into that, but I sent some of the writing to my friend. He wrote back, "Oh, have you ever read Robert Anton Wilson? Your writing is a lot like him. It's very fun." I was like, "No, tell me more." And he told me about this book, the Illuminatus trilogy, which it was written in the late 60s, or published in the early mid 70s, and it sort of came up with the idea of like, what if every conspiracy theory was true? And it dealt with like tons of occult stuff, like Atlantis and like all this sort of stuff. And the main character rides around on a giant golden submarine as the head of the Illuminati. But it took me 5 years to actually find the book. I didn't want to look on Amazon for some reason. I always like to find books in bookstores. And so I began to think like that this book about conspiracy theories might be a conspiracy itself. And then one night in London, I was at a bookstore and we were going to the pub, and my friend Alex showed up and handed me a copy of it. And I woke up the next day completely hungover, but then started reading it. And I realized that all this stuff could be really, really fun. And this is what sort of got me into all of this, because Wilson and Shea presented it in a very skeptical, but still, this could be true and sort of fun sort of way. And I was reading about this in that John Higgs's KLF book that I mentioned before. Wilson wrote books called Cosmic Trigger, which is sort of about more real life experiences. And in the late 70s, he thought he was receiving transmissions from the star Sirius, and he couldn't deny that he's. What's that?
From the dolphins, Sirius, isn't it? It's dolphin energy, I think. That's what I.
There's dolphins in the Illuminatus trilogy too. But he was like, okay, this could be true. Seems a little weird. So he went to see like some sort of psychic who said no, he was receiving voices from some sort of ancient shaman. He's like, okay. And then he went to another psychic who said, no, it wasn't. I think like a Japanese shaman. It's actually an Irish bard who you're receiving images from. And then he started watching. Then someone told him he was receiving images from, I think, a rabbit spirit. And then he was watching the Jimmy Stewart movie, Harvey, where he's an alcoholic and he starts talking to like a giant rabbit outside. And Wilson decided that, actually these voices are from a giant rabbit. It's this 6'4" rabbit that he's receiving communications from, because he knew he wouldn't take that too seriously.
That's brilliant, isn't it? I think that's amazing. But it is so interesting, this stuff. And I think you're right. It is, for me, that element of of enjoyment and excitement about possibilities, rather than being kind of what I used to be, was just closed, but also quite narcissistic, in a sense that anybody who thought anything else was a bit stupid or whatever, and you're like, well, yeah, but actually there's a lot of really clever people with PhDs who seem to be heavily invested in metaphysics and the paranormal. So then anyway, it's fun, isn't it? So like, whatever.
And I think if something works, it almost doesn't matter. Like feng shui, lots of people are doubters, but
this is another thing, isn't it, where it's like, I mean, this is where I quite like my balance model, because there is that sense of everyone who's like, there's no evidence, or the evidence points, and you're like, well, hang on, what about if you could just let go of that for a minute and just explore and be excited about the possibility that something outside of the box might actually be the thing that's creating the dissonance and the struggle and the why can't I get this, why can't I understand this? Just go, actually, it's right in front of you. It's just like, just go with it. I find that to be a better way to be, let's say. Everything doesn't have to be a struggle. There's a book, Power versus Force, by Dr. David Hawkin, I think it is, where he talks about being always quite sort of receptive to things beyond, let's say. And I don't want to do him a disservice by not kind of giving him a decent kind of roundup of his book, but he basically sort of says, we're so involved in trying to force things, and force outcomes, and it's very human, this kind of war and struggle, and everything's got to be you've got to but actually power is a much stronger and a much more powerful tool, whereby you don't try. And I suppose it's that whole Yoda thing, it's do or do not, there is no try, which it's funny with these films that come out with all these little gems, especially like the Star Wars trilogy and the Force, and basically chi energy, or that it's just
I do
working.
wonder how much of my spiritual belief system stems from Star Wars. Like, there is a force that is neutral around us, and you can use it for good or evil. It seems to make perfect sense.
Completely. I don't know if this is on your radar, but there's a remote viewing channel on YouTube called Farsight Press, I think it is. And they recently did a remote viewing into the mind, when he was writing the Star Wars trilogy, sort of like where all that came from. And I think it basically was that there is some kind of past life correlation to something that he remembers, but maybe doesn't remember it consciously, and it was just that expression of of having to get it down into film, which is really interesting, because again, the past lives, like, what's all that? I mean, time is a fourth dimensional construct anyway. I mean, I could be having a past life in a future for all I know. So
yeah, past lives I've never really had much interest in diving into, just because I don't know, there's so much else, and like I find other things useful.
and I do also think that we need to be living in our presence much better, so too much focus on delving into what's come before. I can understand where people go to it from a healing perspective. I do kind of get it, but equally, how much you want to like increase your vibration, live a better experience, is down to this: do what you love.
Yeah, right here.
Without question, with abandon, like a child, like nobody's watching, and go for it. And the more that we get to do that, then then the healing kind of occurs, because you're not thinking about it. I had a Alexander technique teacher who,
I love that stuff.
he was really instrumental in me getting rid of chronic anxiety that was prevalent in my 20s. and it was really one of the simplest things he said that helped, which was, he said, Hannah, we don't actually remember the past accurately. Our brains will construct it to the way that we feel it should be. So we can't trust that. And we have absolutely no control over the future. So there's absolutely no point worrying over that. So the only thing that we can really do is focus our best intention on being in the present. And I thought, oh yeah. Do you know what I mean? It was like, oh yeah. And there were a lot of times when I then had to remind myself of that. And he provided some very useful tools that kind of allowed me to practice getting into the present. And this was really before I delved into meditation and things. But it's such an interesting one where, there's lots and lots of therapies, particularly, sort of psychology and things that insist on dragging up the past. And for me, and I'm not saying everybody, because everybody's modality works for them, and that's fine. I believe in equifinality, but for me, what's the point? It's happened.
Yeah, that's something I've had to learn a lot, because I have lots of earth in my chart, which tends to earth, you get stuck. Yeah, so I tend to get stuck in the past, and it's like, this isn't useful.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Well, I mean, why don't we round up and just kind of trying to summarize a little bit. What's BaZi to you? And, what would you recommend it for?
You can use it for absolutely everything if you're asking the right questions of it. That's, I think, what's really great. It's fascinating to me. There's always more to learn. There's always going to be more to learn. But I've gotten incredible insights that have allowed me to change my life to be much more freer, like not as stuck as I was, and getting more stuff that I want to be done. And I've healed some amazing things just by becoming more conscious of what they were that, wanted to be healed. So yeah, I would definitely recommend it for healing. If I were to do your reading, we'd probably focus on that. But people use it for business all the time, especially in the East, because there's lots of different wealth things you can do with it.
Excellent. Well, it sounds absolutely fascinating. And I would love to delve into it a little bit more, perhaps come with some specific questions for you, so we can kind of try and delve at some point. But for now, thank you very much. So if people want to find you, where's the best place to come?
Okay, my BaZi page, I'm going to be making a website soon, but right now it's on Facebook. It's BaZi, which is BaZi. Actually, no, it's Double Dragon BaZi Consulting. And then my website for all my different stuff is augstone.com, AUGSTONE.
Excellent. Perfect. Well, thanks for coming on and chatting.
No, thanks for having me.
It's lovely to meet you.
We covered a lot of ground.
I think we have, that's interesting. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I hope to have you on again. Perhaps we can focus on something a bit specific. We'll have a think about it. Or just chew the fat, because that's kind of fun too.
Yeah.
On our journeys down various rabbit holes.
Oh, I meant to tell you this. Your hour, which relates to your thoughts and aspirations, is a metal rabbit. So it's kind of cool you chose rabbit hole as the title.
Synchronicities everywhere. Excellent. Perfect. Well, thank you very much, and speak again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Anna.
Thank you so much for listening. Your support is appreciated, so please like us and leave a comment if you wish, and subscribe to stay up to date with more weird and wonderful topics.